Well, hello to everyone that's joining. Welcome to another series of our Launch Metrics LinkedIn Leaders Live. I'm just going to give it a few more minutes before I kick off and introduce the lovely lady that's sharing the screen with me, because I know we're just at the top of the hour, and usually people are straggling a few minutes in to get started. And even if we've been like working from home and doing these digital events or digital chats for so long, I find that there's always still a technology challenge. And that said, I do think, Instagram Live and LinkedIn Live are much easier because you're so used to those platforms and you just click and it works, but who knows?
I mean, yeah, it's definitely something I'm still coming to terms with. You can see me basically sitting in a shed here right now. And it's amazing to have the opportunity to have these conversations virtually. But, there's a lot to miss about doing it physically too, as we're going to talk about.
Yeah. I'm so glad though that we can finally like do this chat. I know we've been talking with you and your team while you're on maternity leave and for so long about like catching up and doing something so nice. So for those of you, just joining, my lovely guest, Katie, is going to be introducing herself shortly from Lyst. But we're talking today about, Fashion Week and how Fashion Week is back and what did it look like, and overall, what is the future of Fashion Week? So we really want to spend a few minutes today taking a deep dive into, the top brands, top influencers and celebrities, top trends. More obviously, Katie and I work for data companies, so top trends as far as the data and the numbers, what success looks like, and what we're thinking to the future. So, why don't we kick off? Katie, thank you so much for joining us. Maybe you could introduce yourself. Obviously, everyone knows who Lyst is, but for the few maybe that have yet to discover this amazing platform, maybe you could talk a little bit about what you guys do.
Sure. Well, I'm Katie Lubin, and I am VP of Brand and Comms at Lyst, which is a fashion technology platform and a premium shopping app. And last year, around 170 million shoppers used Lyst to find and search for and browse for luxury fashion online. And what we love to do is share the insights from our data around what those customers are looking for, are shopping, are wish listing in our app, and share them with both our partner brands that we work with on the platform to give them real kind of unique and like special value from us as Lyst as a partner, and also with the world more broadly to sort of tell the stories of what the world wants to wear. And my team at Lyst in sort of brand is specifically tasked with mining these insights and helping to share them and find the stories around them. And what we're seeing more and more is that there's so much compelling, interesting, unusual, unexpected anecdotes that come out of looking at this fashion data that is really like useful and interesting beyond just the industry brand partner audience, and actually is kind of interesting to the wider world too.
I completely agree with you. So if you have not joined one of our LinkedIn Leaders Live, I'm Alison Braget. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer. And it's my job to bring really smart people like Katie onto these conversations to have them share those tidbits of insights that aren't just from, or not just for fashion people, but really great insights into how you should be thinking or rethinking your strategies to adapt to this changing world. So I know we're here to talk about, Fashion Week, celebrities, all of these glamorous things, but I feel like, you and I were talking backstage that we can't really jump into this topic of conversation without at least a moment to acknowledge what's happening in the world and, talking about this geopolitical situation that's happening with Russia and the Ukraine, and really the impact, not just emotionally, how it's impacting all of us. And it's been incredible to see people all over the world kind of leveraging their virtual and digital voices to take a stand and to help and to be a part of it. But it was also interesting to see, during Fashion Week, how, I mean, the fashion community has always been, I remember even one of my like first internship experiences working with Naomi Campbell on Fashion for Relief after, Hurricane Katrina. But I think that our industry does a phenomenal job of trying to bring attention, awareness, and funds to really do something good. And, it was really interesting to see when we were looking at the data from Fashion Week that 20% of the conversation was about how brands were raising awareness of what was happening to the Ukrainian people. So, it makes me proud that even sometimes in the most, as non-fashion people would say, superficial moments, which aren't because it's just how we do business, but what look like the most glamorous, fun, you know, expensive and exciting moments in fashion, that even then we can use this power to do good. What are your thoughts? What are you guys thinking? What have you been talking about?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think it would be crazy to talk about Fashion Week in particular without acknowledging that there was this, looming, unfolding situation in Ukraine, which kind of happened at the exact same time that Milan Fashion Week was kicking off. And kind of weirdly, like 2 years before, it kind of felt like a similar looming, threatening, not similar, but another unfolding situation with the pandemic was also kind of kicking off around the exact same time. And so I think that it's always interesting to see how fashion as an industry responds, and how the tone and the mood and the vision of fashion designers and brands will evolve for next season too, having now lived through this moment. And like, with regards to looking back at the season just gone, I think it's always worth remembering that the designers and the teams had put months of work into these show moments and collections, like before this situation kind of unfolded and happened. But actually, fashion is always seen through this lens of like cultural context of what's going on at that moment. And so that kind of, peripheral context really affected how, as consumers and as customers, we saw the events that unfolded. But that's not to say that there wasn't a huge amount of energy and excitement and shows, but I think there was definitely a kind of strange, somber vibe, unexpectedly, given the crazy events that were happening in the world.
Yeah, I think one thing that you said is really interesting that people forget is that how much time these designers put into their show, and how every single thing from the color to the seating chart is like planned months and months in advance. And it makes it even more, I mean, I don't work for a fashion brand, so I don't need to be paid to say these things, but it really is impressive how at last minute someone like Armani will come in and say, no, 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 we've planned this for 6 months, but actually we're going to make the change, or Balenciaga, the same thing, because these moments are so critical to how we speak to the consumer, how we speak to the world about what's happening, that even if they had this artistic and creative vision, they know that within a second, like, we live in this here today, gone tomorrow world. And so it's so important to consider, being nimble and responsive and thinking about the climate, not the temperature, but the climate of the customer in the world. So I do think that's really important in the context of that conversation.
Totally.
So with Go ahead.
No, I was just going to completely agree. And I think that, the brands that are able to move fast and be agile and responsive and reactive are really the brands that we see, building that first response and deeper connection with customers, because they are, thinking about the same things, speaking the same language as their customers now.
Yeah. I think, and that's a kind of interesting segue, the takeaway that we've seen in the pandemic was just that customers are now, I don't want to say pickier than ever, but they've really honed in on what they like, what they don't like, and what they expect from the brands. And I think that, as you said, Fashion Week was still quite exciting. I think people are craving physical connections, and this kind of return to physical shows was just so, so important for the brands, the people attending, the industry, the buyers, but also for the consumers kind of tuning in from around the world. I think they craved like a physical show and the excitement that's generated around a physical show. What are your thoughts? Like, are they here to stay? Obviously, again, you and I work in this digital space, so it's funny for us to be like, physical is so important, and at the same time, everyone's talking about the metaverse being so important. But we all still personally also crave physical interaction. Like, what are your thoughts on that for the fashion industry?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think the way that we kind of live, shop, consume now, it's so fast paced and there's so much noise. And for fashion brands, or for all brands really, like a fashion show moment has always been like a opportunity or a chance to try and get customers, like existing and new customers, to just like pause and stop and see you and engage and feel something. And the fashion show is their kind of vehicle for claiming that moment in the spotlight. And I think that, the value of doing that IRL, physically in the real world with real people there, is that you can create this kind of visceral human experience moment. Uh, you kind of hear people talk about, you know, I was at Alexander McQueen Spring Summer 1999 in a way that you wouldn't hear people talk about, even some of the biggest internet cultural moments. I was there when Kim Kardashian broke the internet on the cover of Paper magazine. It's not the same kind of emotional connection and memory that you get with being there in person at an incredible, powerful happening.
Yeah, it's like,
And
where were you? I was sitting at my computer.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. And then another thing came around the next day that went viral, and we all talked about that for 10 minutes, and something else came away. So I think, that vibe and that energy of being somewhere in real life and experiencing something that is great is super powerful for the people that do get to be there. And I also think that that kind of transcends out, and, the in-person energy and the vibe of doing stuff physically can have this emotional power to those people who consume it from externally too. So I think, especially after 2 years of pandemic, lots of people being at home doing things online, it was really, really important for the community to get together and do stuff physically. And I think we also saw some other factors that had shifted over those last 2 years affecting the whole experience. Like, I was kind of following some of the, with the Paris Fashion Week shows, we saw these huge crowds of like thousands of people outside some of these big shows, waiting for these celebrities and influencers to turn up in a way that, hadn't really been the same at fashion shows for a while. Like, they really have become like these big pop culture moments in some cases where, people are waiting outside to see their favorite celebrities like turn up. And that kind of energy is super exciting, I think, for the fashion community, and also for just fashion as a kind of entertainment vehicle and a popular culture kind of space, to see how much people want to turn up in real life to be there at these show moments, which are like, a high point of the fashion calendar of the year still.
yeah, I mean, I guess that would be kind of my most exciting moment during Fashion Week. I mean, I remember when I started my career, it was all about celebrities. It was before influencers really existed. And you could feel that resurrection of that excitement this season. Like, everyone was excited to be back physically. There was a huge amount of celebrities coming to the different shows. We saw that, I don't know, Milan Fashion Week created more buzz than in many, many recent seasons, something nearly like 200 million in media impact value. 26 million of that coming from like the Gucci Adidas, or Adidas, as British people like to say,
Ah,
collaboration. And on top of that, there was just so much excitement. Like, obviously, Rihanna coming pregnant with Rocky to the shows, or like the huge Machine Gun Kelly performance at Dolce Gabbana, and then him and Megan Fox getting engaged. I mean, there were so many of these key moments that used to happen like regularly during Fashion Week, and that was way pre-pandemic, right? So I think it's an exciting moment. Like, everybody was just waiting for this moment. Do you think, are your thoughts, now that there's this resurrection of celebrities, like, the bigger the better for the fashion houses? Or do you think there's going to need to be, okay, we did a big celebrity this season, but next season we need another a strategy?
I mean, I don't think there's like a one size fits all, that's kind of a pun, playbook here for how brands should think about working with talent. I think that for, the bigger, really established, like huge power player, top five in the list index kind of brands, there's almost a kind of imperialism in the approach now, which you see in the shows too, which is like the venue is huge, and the celebrities they're working with are huge, and the amount of people that they're working with is a lot. And I think to maintain that kind of prestige and that status as a real power player, it makes sense to have these huge household names representing your brand, to kind of re-endorse and reinforce that status and that size, and for those moments to feel big and loud and in your face. Oh, sorry, that's a huge storm here in London. Just kind of.
No.
But
Oh, I just got it a second after you.
yeah,
Where in London do you live?
I'm in Finsbury Park, so like northwest London.
Oh, okay. So I live in East, like Northeast. So I guess it's
Weird. Anyway, did not see that coming. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so big fashion brands, big fashion houses, big name celebrities. I think it makes total sense and like really fits with their whole persona and how customers view those like power players in the game. But I also think that, we are in this real sort of vibe shift moment where we're seeing this kind of transformation across lots of areas of the industry. And in some cases, the old kind of gatekeepers of authority, whether that's the big media brands or big retailers or mega celebrities, they don't always hold the same kinds of power that they had before in the minds of different customers. And so I think it's worth kind of considering for some brands that you can really create meaningful, engaged, powerful communities around your brand by working with talent that has perhaps a smaller reach and a smaller amount of followers, but is like deeply connected to the values and the culture of your brand that you stand for. And we've seen a number of brands where this has become super powerful in creating like really engaged communities of fans around that label. Brands like, I don't know, Telfar, even Jacques Amos and the kind of roster of influencers that he worked with. And, I think that it doesn't necessarily translate now that the bigger the star, the more impact you're going to have for your brand. I think the reach is going to be huge, but actually, like considering the alignment and the culture and the values of the people that you work with can be really, really powerful for smaller brands and working with smaller tastemakers too.
I just had this conversation yesterday with Harriet Walker from the Times because she did an article that came out today about how actually the supermodels of yesterday, Naomi, Cindy, Heidi, etc., are still generating a lot of media impact value for brands today, and we're still seeing them being used on the catwalks and runways around the world. And it was this really interesting conversation about this like mix of celebrities, these like younger, more digitally savvy models, then these influencers, and then these like iconic models. And I think you make a really good point that every brand has different goals and every talent has different specialties or abilities, let's say, besides their ability to actually do great modeling or create great content, right? But in today's kind of digital landscape, brands need to think about all of these different goals, in my opinion, because you could have a great model on the runway, but they're not really like a social media icon, or they're not really someone that's going to help amplify your message. They'll get a lot of PR buzz, but then if you're looking to engage and grow your community, they're not necessarily the right voice for that because they themselves don't have a digital footprint. But then if you work with someone like, I don't know, Leonie Han, who's like a very well-known, or, a Xenia, who has a really good following, but maybe isn't as big as a Chiara Ferrani yet, you see a different type of engagement from that digital community. Whereas someone like Chiara has now become this mega all-star influencer. And for her, it's more about amplification, less about like that one-to-one engagement. So I think people get caught up in names and they really forget, okay, like what do I really want to get out of this besides like at the end of the day, they're going to post, but yeah, you're going to get press coverage, but really what's the goal? Like, do you need to grow your community? Do you want to try to sell something? Do you want to try to get more legitimacy? Do you want to get new eyeballs looking at you? And it's so hard to not, I think for these brands not to get wrapped up in the excitement of like, oh, Kiara posted about us, or like, did it happen? Or someone RSVP'd, because it's exciting when you're a young brand growing, but at the same time, not every action really has the right reaction that you're looking for, in my opinion.
Totally. It's fully, I think, like brands need to be really, really smart with being clear on those objectives up front with working with talent and what they're trying to achieve. And then, also having that freedom that, you're working with a person and actually like using what that person stands for and what that person means to their followers in that unique way, and that there isn't going to be one strategic oversight that you can apply to every single person you work with that's going to react in the same way to every single objective you have. And so it's, again, comes back to being agile and reactive and identifying this talent early and working with them in a way that is unique to what you need to achieve.
Completely. So that does make me think of a really interesting question I want to ask you, but I do want to interrupt again. So
Yeah.
now that thunder has turned into like massive torrential downpour, and I've now realized staring at our cameras, I never turned my lights on and it's just getting darker and darker. So if you can't see me by the end of this LinkedIn live, I'll make sure I don't turn off my microphone. It will turn into like a podcast
Huh.
versus,
Sounds like it's
video.
a storm out there. It's like seriously rainy and dark.
Yeah. I guess we just got it as this call started. I think you make a really good point though about how you're leveraging their content, what kind of content they're creating. I mean, the other question that we get to is, it's about channels, right? Like everyone's talking about TikTok, but we know Instagram and YouTube are still quite valuable. What during Fashion Week, the other thing I'm sure you've read about or you guys are also seeing too, but like K-pop stars have become, they're taking over Fashion Week. And we know the K-pop group, The Boys, generated nearly 2 million in media impact value through Instagram, which is really interesting during Men's Fashion Week, even that. But then, we've also seen that TikTok and YouTube have generated something like another 20, 30 million per post from different other influencers. So I guess I would say, what are you guys thinking about all of these different channels? Do you think brands should leverage certain influencers on certain channels? Do you think brands should have a one channel approach? What are your thoughts and feelings on that?
I mean, I think one of the like joys and the challenges of working in fashion is that,
Ways and challenges.
yeah, new channels and new things are happening and opening up all the time. And for brands, especially as brands get kind of bigger, there can sometimes be this tension between wanting to be an early adopter and, get in there first and be fast, and playing it safe, or sticking to what has really worked for you historically before. And I think that when it comes to working with talent and with the different channels and with the different kinds of people, this is like one area where like we're starting to see a real opening up of the brand strategy to explore, like for some brands, lots of different kinds of people on different kinds of platforms. And like from our perspective at Lyst, we're super excited about TikTok and what we're seeing there. um it's absolutely dominating style trends and the sort of discussion around trends. And you know what's freeing and exciting about it, I think, is that there's this real kind of new energy in the creators and how they're dressing and the themes that they want to talk about and how they dig into those themes, like with a real kind of legit, unfiltered creative expression that is authentic and raw and not perfectly composed. And so in some cases, to some brands, that is probably a little bit scary, because if you're a brand that is very controlled in your image and how you choose to present yourself, then handing over the reins to something like that can be a little bit like out of your comfort zone. But we've seen this movie before in fashion. Like, I remember when the bloggers were first invited to the Fashion Week shows, and Instagram kind of was becoming the way to share trends and outfit posts, and we started seeing these made for Instagram brand activations and products happening more and more and more. And I think that, going back to your question of like how should brands approach these channels and approach these different influencers, like I hope that lots of brands will see the value in appealing to new audiences in new ways, but you need to stay authentic to what that channel and that creator and that audience is looking for and is actually engaged with. And otherwise, any kinds of attempts at collaboration feel inauthentic and just don't land. And so we've seen that kind of with some brands, dipping their toe in a way that you can't replicate what you want to do on one channel with someone necessarily on this other channel with someone else. And so it takes a little bit of a bit of a bold approach. I think you have to take some risks. You have to open up and think quite freely about what you want to do. But I think that brands should not be frightened to explore these new channels and to work with new kinds of voices. And actually, at Lyst, it's something that we believe quite passionately about, is this idea of opening up and democratizing fashion. And it's kind of one of the reasons why we think it's interesting to share these insights of real world shoppers, is because it's an alternative viewpoint on how the world likes to see and consume fashion. And what we see in TikTok especially is that these kind of traditionally outsidery voices, or people who maybe don't have a following or haven't come from a traditional route into the industry, are able to have their voices heard and to make an impact. And it's thrilling to see these kind of people now represented at the traditional fashion shows, and in the front row and commenting on those and writing for established publications, as well as just continuing to grow their own platforms and channels in authentic, like kind of organic and ways, and through partnerships with brands. So yeah, I think it's just a really exciting time that there's so much going on, and there's so much new areas to explore, as well as the tried and tested kind of techniques that fashion brands have been leveraging for a few years.
Yeah. With that actually comment, we just have a few minutes left, but I want to take an audience question that is quite relevant. We have a question from Amelie Parker, and she was saying, if we can't recreate the real life buzz of Fashion Week in a digital space, do you think the future of Fashion Week in the metaverse is secure? So I can start, and then if you have a comment, I'll give you 30 seconds to think about your answer. It's interesting. We actually just did some data monitoring of the Metaverse Fashion Week. And of course, I don't want to reveal anything, so we're going to put out official results. But so far, the results have been really, really strong. I think there's a lot of curiosity. I think, just as Katie was saying too, that brands are always eager and interested about the new platform. We just did a session with some of our customers. I think the challenge is that while the metaverse is really exciting, and I think brands are eager to see how they can dip their toes into it, I don't think the technology is developed enough yet that brands feel secure that they can replicate the brand experience they want in the metaverse. So theoretically, yes, when the metaverse is up and running, I think it's going to be really interesting. And obviously, we've even already seen that even when people are excited about physical shows, they still are looking for some digital element, and that concept of phygital is so important that I'd say in the future, the metaverse is just going to be an extension. I mean, my colleague and I were just talking because we're going to be speaking at an event in Monaco that's, physical, digital, and the metaverse, like how these three collide when it comes to events in the future. So, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think broadly like pretty aligned that it's really early days on this journey of kind of moving towards a whole metaverse existence in fashion and outside of fashion, and the creativity and the spirit of fashion in like escapism and dressing up and fantasy means that fashion really lends itself in theory really well to this world. It's an industry of creative people who like to tell stories and dress up. Like, why? Amazing. We can wear whatever we want. We can look however we want. We can do all these incredible activations, without having to physically pull them all together. But I think it's just like very, very early days. And I think that for brands, who are able to harness the community around these like metaverse or, digital activations, then that's just another incredible touch point for retaining that loyalty and that path of conversation and new spaces to engage with customers in new ways. But I also think it's just very early days, and it's too soon to make any like huge calls over how this is going to impact the industry overall, and what share of which customers will find this really relevant. I think that's one thing to call out, is that for many brands, they have many different kinds of shoppers who love that same brand, and the metaverse might be really, really exciting to one particular bucket of those customers, and absolutely not for the other customer who just wants to go into a store and buy a beautiful handbag, and that's their experience of interacting with the brand. So I think it is a huge and exciting opportunity with lots and lots of potential, but we're still really early in the game to see like how it's going to evolve and unfold over the next few years.
Yeah. Well, I think that was a great note to end on. Thank you so much. And thank you all for tuning in today. It was great to talk about the excitement of being back physically at Fashion Week. And I think we have a lot to consider, and also to remember that while the excitement of Fashion Week is back, we still have a lot of clothes to sell. So let's figure out how we can, not forget about the brand building, the brand performance we're trying to drive for our brands as we leverage celebrities, influencers, and other voices in the physical, digital, and metaverse. So thank you so much, Katie. It was good to see you virtually. Hopefully I see you physically soon. And Have a great day.
And you, thank you.
Thanks
Bye.
everyone for joining. Bye.